Morning. So yeah, I guess I was just thinking about this idea of um, self-dialogue and also this element of like noticing whether or not we're noticing negative things or positive things, you know. And there is this element where we can get in the habit of noticing positive things, and we can get in the habit of noticing negative things. And sometimes that's to do with narratives that we've copied from other people, you know. So it might be our parents, for example. There's cobwebs everywhere. So it might be that it's like a learned behaviour in some ways, you know, where it's like, you know, mum or dad or something, or someone always had dialogue that was around a woe or kind of noticing negative things about the world, or having an approach that was complaining about things and noticing things that weren't right all the time, yeah? And, you know, it's tricky because it kind of becomes like a default thing in some ways, where we notice the negatives sometimes. And it's important sometimes to notice the negatives, to see the full picture. But there is this aspect where we can then dismiss all the positive things that are happening, you know, or positive opportunities that might exist, because we could get into a narrative around it being finding the negatives in that situation, you know, and potentially having like a catastrophic dialogue around those things. Oh, this is going to be like that, and this will happen like this. And so it can be sometimes noticing what dialogue you're having about the world and thinking to yourself, is this a pessimistic or is it an optimistic dialogue I'm having, you know? And it's a little bit like, well, you know, maybe it's an exercise where you could try. I know it can be hard for some people to, you know, if you are caught in a negative loop cycle around noticing the negatives, it can be just writing down what maybe someone else, say you could put the hat on somebody else that's like a optimistic person, you know. How might they see this situation, you know? Because it can be helpful to detach it from ourselves, because we might be in such a habit of noticing the negative, it's hard for us to do it. So we can say, well, what about that optimistic person we know? What would they make of this situation? Oh, well, they might say, you know, there's cobwebs everywhere. So they might say, oh, that's good that we've got cobwebs on us, you know, because, you know, it's an external focus of attention, for example, you know. Or it might be like, well, that's good that I woke up extra early this morning, even though I didn't have a long sleep, because I've had this glorious long walk this morning, which I wouldn't have had otherwise, maybe if I'd have slept in, for example, you know. I've seen so many cool things like rabbits and foxes and birds and people tending to their allotments and all sorts of things this morning. And there's this element of like, well, I wouldn't have seen that otherwise, you know. And now, because I'm so early, I can take a detour through some more woods and get all the vibes from that, you know. So it's this thing of, you know, noticing what our own dialogues are about the world. And it's really easy to get caught in a negative spiral with social media, news streams. I mean, the whole idea with news streams most of the time is that, you know, they can lead us to you know, the whole idea with it a lot of the time is it's like sensationalist, you know, it's kind of triggering adrenaline or things that might cause outrage and stuff like that. And there is this element where I've just walked through this and it was a bit distracting, you know, because I did notice some kids in here the other day, and what they've done is, which isn't great in some ways, it kind of fits with this, is they've chopped some trees down, you know, which they shouldn't have done, I would imagine, but they've made like a barrier out of it or something like that, unless it wasn't these kids that did that. Maybe it was the conservationists, because they've kind of made these rows. There's a row back there as well. I don't know, maybe it was the kids that was in here doing it, but they built a ramp over there for doing mountain biking, because I remember that, and they've also been coming down there on the mountain bikes. So it might be that my perception is that they've chopped these trees down. It could have been someone else. Either way, and there's another one missing here. It's a little bit like, how did this thing happen, you know? And I guess we could have a negative dialogue around it where it's like, these kids have destroyed the place, you know? Or it could be, well, it might be that there's actually the building hedges for hedgehogs, nests for hedgehogs. Or we could see it in the light of, well, at least these kids are not down the town centre terrorising old people and drinking and you know, stealing from the shops, you know. At least they're in the woods messing around with wood and chopping things up and building ramps for mountain bikes and whatever else. Who's to know what's happening there, really? But there's this way where we could look at it as like a terrible thing, or we could think, well, you know what, these kids are in the woods, you know, and would that have happened back in the day when there was limitless woods for kids to play in and do what they wanted, and chopping up a tree wouldn't have been such a bad thing, you know, if they're building a base or building something to do an activity. Or we could obviously see it as destroying nature, but I would say potentially along the tendency to see it as, in some ways, that I'd rather they be doing that than shoplifting in the town centre, drinking and terrorising old people, which I see also in the town centre quite often. So, perfect example in some ways, in the middle of, who'd have thought, you know, just walking along like that. So it's this thing, isn't it, where we can kind of notice the negative or not notice some of the positives as well. And it's like, what lens are we seeing the world through? And can we see maybe both pictures, but can we also, if we want to, notice a more optimistic view or a positive dialogue, you know, about things, you know? So maybe give it a go for yourself and notice, at least in the first instance, what the general dialogue is. Take some notes down just for 10 minutes even. What are the dialogues that are coming up? What are the things you're noticing? Even one example, is that you can choose to change your social media feed as well. So, for example, you could go into your social media account, whatever it is. It could be YouTube or Facebook or other stuff, and Instagram or whatever. And you could go in there and clean it up and purposefully choose positive news stories or something that might be a positive exercise for you to do. Yeah, so it might be like you want to learn a new instrument or something like that, or there's a particularly cool chilling music channel that you like, or there's maybe something about gardening or other things, and you can amend your algorithm by kind of adding in these things and subscribe it to different things, and delete off things that might be like negative news sites or stuff like that if you wanted to, because these all kind of feed our view of the world, And it can be that if we've been caught in a negative, noticing negative things more cycle, then that algorithm's noticed that probably, and will probably be feeding you more of that, you know. So yeah, you could do that as well. And then it's really trying to notice in a practical way some of the positive views or positive kind of ways of seeing things. Yeah, and see how you get on with it. It can be a tricky thing to break, and it does take practice, and it will take effort to start to notice these things, like the positive stuff more, you know. And it's not that we ignore the negative things, we notice that, but we choose in some ways to reframe and see it through a different lens sometimes, because it can change our whole experience of life and help us to enjoy it more, you know. Yeah. So have fun and good luck with it.